Hey guys, today we're going to take some notes on surface area. This is really similar to when we talked about area before, looking at rectangles and squares and triangles and all that kind of stuff, except for now we're talking about a three-dimensional object. So for today's notes, you're going to fill them in like you normally would, and then once you finish it, I want you to go back to Canvas, and instead of clicking on assignments, I want you to click on quizzes. So this would be on the left side of the menu where it says assignments, modules, all that kind of stuff. Click on quizzes and there is a surface area quiz. There are 7 questions in that quiz, and it's not really a quiz. I just had to name it quiz because that's where it's at in Canvas. But I want you to try that out, and you have to score at least 5 points before you can move on. So if you don't do well the first time, you can do multiple attempts at it. As soon as you get to 5 points, submit that answer, or hopefully better. Submit those answers to me so that I can record your score, and then you can take your note packet, bring it over to Mr. Levi so he can look and make sure that it's been completed entirely, and then he'll give you today's homework assignment. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Remember that if I go too fast, you can hit pause on it, write down what you need to, and then click the play button again, but your notes need to be filled in entirely. Here we go. Surface area is the sum of the area of the surfaces of a solid figure. So you guys have already figured out how to do area. When we're looking at a three-dimensional item like this, I don't want to just know the area of this one side. I want to know if I, let's say, had wrapping paper and I wanted to wrap this whole thing in wrapping paper, how much would I need to cover every single side of this three-dimensional item? That is what surface area is. If you need to hit pause, please do that. The next thing that we're talking about in our vocab are nets. So when I had that rectangular prism that I was just looking at, and I take it out of the clear plastic box that it was in, and I open it up to see how it folds together or unfolds, this is called a net, or it's a two-dimensional object, a pattern or a layout. It says the pattern made when a surface of a 3D figure is laid out flat, showing the face of each figure. So the faces, of course, are our 2 squares, and our 1, 2, 3, 4 rectangles are each a face. This has 6 faces. Please fill that in. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so finding the surface area of a prism, you're going to have the same method for all prisms. Remember that a prism is a prism. You know this because all of the sides are rectangles or squares. Okay, a pyramid comes to a point and all of its sides are triangles. So we're looking at a prism here. Essentially, we're looking at a shape very similar to this one here. Instead of these side pieces being squares, they're rectangles. So it's a rectangular prism. Okay, so to find surface area, what we're going to do is try to visualize in our mind how we can break this three-dimensional shape down into a net like this is. And then we have to solve for each shape that we see that's in the net. So let's start here. We're going to use a net. This is method number 1, use the net. And you could draw a net to help you see the face of each prism. We practiced this last week where I showed you some three-dimensional shapes and I asked you to please try to draw the net to it, or I showed you some nets and asked you to try to sketch what shape it actually created. So this is a challenging thing for some students to try to visualize in their minds. But once you get a little practice at it, you'll do just fine. So in this particular shape that we're looking at, we have nothing but a bunch of rectangles. And you know that for rectangles, the formula is length times width, or base times height. So there's not going to be anything super tricky here. So let's start hammering this out. So for rectangle A, we have the dimensions of a height of 4 and a base of 10. So it's just simply 10 times 4, which is 40. Let's look at B. For this rectangle, we have a base that's still 10. You know it's 10 because this side is, so it's 10, and a height of 17. So we have 10 times 17, and that is 140 centimeters. For rectangle C, we have a base that is 4 centimeters wide, and still a height of 17, you know that it is because this is, so all of these lines are 17. So 4 times 17, which is 68. We're going to move on to D. It's going to have a base of 10, just like the top up here. And again, that side right here is 17, so 10 times 17. For rectangle E, it's just like this one. It's going to be the exact same dimensions, 4 times 17. And you'll notice that some of them are repeating, right? So F should be the same as A, right? It should be 10 times 4. Once we figure out all of those areas for each one of these rectangles, then we're just going to take all of these and add them together. 40 plus 170 plus 68 plus 170 plus 68 plus 40. And when we do that, we get a total of 500 and, let me move this here, 556 centimeters squared. Make sure that you have your labels. I'm in the corner here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. If you still need to record stuff, please hit pause now. Okay, so the next way that you could find the surface area is to use the three-dimensional drawing or shape, where you may not need to necessarily lay it out as a net. Maybe you are able to visualize that. So we're going to do the same thing. You know that this shape has, I hope you know, 6 sides. It has 4 that wrap around, the back piece back here, 1, the side piece here, 2, the front piece, 3, this side wall, 4, and then the top is 5 and the bottom is 6. Anything that's a cube or a rectangle or a square is going to be 6-sided. Okay, so you need to have 6 formulas. Okay, 6 sides that you got the area for. Here we go. The front side is going to be 12 times 3. Right? 12 times 3, because we have a base of 12 and a height of 3. The side over here is going to be 4 by 3, because over here is 3, so we know that all of them are 3, 4 times 3, which is 12. And I'm multiplying these times 2 because you have truly 2 identical sides on this whole shape. So this side over here and this side over here are the same dimensions. The top and the bottom are the same dimensions. The front and the back are all the same dimensions. So when I go back here to front side A, we've got 12 times 3 is 36, and then I do 36 times 2 because I know that the front and the back are the same. I have 2 with that dimension. For the sides, 4 times 3. This side and this side are 4 times 3, so I'm taking that area and multiplying it by 2. So let's do the last. We're going to do the top and the bottom. We've got a length or a base of 12, and we have a width of 4 right here. So it's going to be 12 times 4, which is 48, and then I'm multiplying it by 2 because, again, the top and the bottom have the same dimensions. And then I'm going to do just exactly what I did in the last slide, which was I'm going to take all of these area calculations and add them together. So 72 plus 24 plus 96. And you should get the total of 192 square units. Please make sure you fill in your notes. I'm going to go ahead and move on. If you need to pause, please do that now. All right. The last shape that we need to talk about is the surface area of a pyramid, which is kind of unique because we're not talking about rectangles anymore. You guys are very familiar with rectangles and how to solve surface area of rectangles. But we haven't necessarily gotten into pyramids. So remember, we have 2 formulas that we're going to be looking at here, both a square or a rectangle and a triangle. All right, so let's just get into this. We're going to find the surface area of the square and the 4 triangles. So we'll start with the square. We've got a base and a height, both of 6. So 6 times 6 is 36. But moving on to this triangle, I want to remind you, refresh your memory about how to find the area of a triangle. The formula for an area of a triangle is half the height times the base. The way that we solved it when we were actually working in that unit was to do the base times the height and divide by 2. So let's look at these triangles, and we want to know if they're identical. Well, when we look at this sketch here of the net, so this is the three-dimensional figure, and this is the net over here, it looks like they're all identical. And considering that this is a square, if we didn't have identical triangles when we tried to fold it up into this nice 3D shape, it would be all wonky and crazy, and it wouldn't come to a perfect point. So it has to have, looking at this one here, which is the same exact shape, just folded differently. When we look at it, we can tell that these triangles are all congruent. If you remember that word, I hope you remember that word, it means equal or identical. So these, if we didn't have identical triangles, they could not come to a perfect point. They would be bananas and crazy. All right, so what we're going to do is start working on this formula for the triangles. Remember that the formula is half the base times the height equals whatever the area is of the triangle. So we're going to figure out the area here. We have half of the base, okay, so the base is 6 times the height. The height is 5. Remember that height is found on the right angle, equals 30. So 6 times 5 equals 30. Divided in half, or divided by 2, is 15. Move me here. But we have 4 triangles, and they all have the exact same dimensions. Each side of that triangle is 6 times 5 divided by 2. And there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 triangles that have those measurements. So we got the area for one of them, and it came out to be 15. We're going to multiply it by 4 so that we can account for each one of these triangles. 15 for this one, 15 for this one, 15 for this one, and 15 for this one. And we get a total of 60. When you add this together, we're going to do exactly what we did for our other shapes. We're going to have 36 plus 60. We get a surface area of 96 feet squared for this particular shape. Okay, when you take this quiz today, you are going to do surface area for rectangles and triangles and pyramids and prisms. I also threw in there a trapezoid, so I'm going to tell you the formula for trapezoid, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you write that formula down on the back of your note packet so that you have it when it's time to get to it, because I'm guessing some of you threw away your note packet. So let me write it down here. The formula is, and you should write it down too, the formula is half the height times base 1 plus base 2. So I'll say that again and hold it up for you. The formula is half the height times base 1 plus base 2. So when you look at those shapes, it might have a trapezoid in there, it might have a rectangle in there, it might have a square in there. You're going to have multiple formulas that you have to carry out, just like this one. You had a square formula and you had triangles. I don't want you to be intimidated by that. You're just going to give it your best practice today, and then take that quiz and then move on to today's homework assignment. If you can't get a 5 before it's time to go on the quiz, I still want you to come over and see Mr. Levi and get the homework assignment that's going to be due on Monday. I hope you guys have a nice afternoon and a great weekend. I will see you next week.